Welcome everyone to this Let's Play of Kerbal Space Program 1.1 Turbocharge. Now, I am on Duna. You will remember this little buggy from the previous episodes. We are at Duna's poles and I am biome hunting. I am biome hunting here with the X Science mod, which is a great little mod. It tells you what experiments you have currently on the vehicle. That's what I've selected right now. It tells you what all those experiments are. It tells you where you are, which biome you are in, and how much science you have collected or are yet to collect in that biome. Now I'm going to carefully turn myself around because I know that we passed through both the lowlands biome and the craters biome somewhere back here. So I'm just going to go and collect some of that science because it's we're going to be making a lot of use of this science because I want to take out some more vehicles to Duna and also further afield, such as to Lathe, another planet that is suitable for habitation. I don't know how suitable Duna would be, but I'm sure we're going to be setting up a base here sometime soon. So we're going to be able to do that. So science is going to be useful for research. So let's go biome hunting, and when we find such a biome we will come straight back. Well, it didn't take long for us to come across Duna's craters. So you can see we're in the Duna's craters biome here, and we can see the experiments we've already done and those that we've already partially completed. So we still have a lot to do in this biome, and what I want to do is I want to make use of, if I can find the particular experiment I'm interested in, I want to make use of a new feature in 1.1, which is the ability to pin menus, and this is particularly useful for pinning menus of hard to find experiments. So let's just pin that one. We can do the same for the surface scanner. Let's here we go, the Pressmat barometer. So let's pin that one. There's no point pinning the mystery goo because we've used those experiments, but we still do have this laser light imager and the seismic accelerometer, so we can pin those to make them easy to get at. So let's just log the temperature. So let's do a temperature log. Just get rid of this for the moment. That's going to yield recoverable 30 science, but none transmittable. So there's no point in keeping that one. We can do the X-ray surface analyzer here on the front. There we go. You can just see it doing its thing there. So how much science is that going to give us? That's going to give us 80 recoverable and 80 transmittable, so we will keep that one. We got the Pressmat barometer, 48 recoverable but none of it transmittable, so no point in keeping that one. We can collect the laser data, that's from the back here, there we go. So there's nothing to collect for that one because we've completed it already. And finally we have the seismic accelerometer, so let's log that one. That's going to give us 72 transmittable science, so we will keep that. Now I happen to know that this is one of the other experiments. This magnetometer is one of the other experiments that's not worth is not worth doing again, but I am going to pin its menu. So let's just pin that menu up here at the top out of the way. So I think we can go seeking a further biome. I think down here we should be able to find the lowlands biome and just eke out a little bit more science. In the meantime, I'll transmit what we've got when the electric charge has reached maximum, and then we'll have one more last go with harvesting science when we reach the lowlands. Well, it's still rather frosty here in Duna's lowlands, but we do have all of the experiments still to do. So we can log the magnetometer, just gone off the top of the display there. That's going to give us, just close that out of the way, 40 recoverable and transmittable science, so we will take that and we will toggle the magnetometer shut. Next we will do the temperature scan. Duna is colder than you expected, but it's definitely colder in the lowlands than I expected it to be in the poles. But that's going to be another 32 transmittable science, so we can collect X-ray data. That's this experiment here at the front, as we know. So it's doing its test there now. There we go. So that's another 80 transmittable science. We shall do a pressure scan for 48 transmittable science. The pressure in this basin is a whole notch higher on the scale. Yeah, I don't know what it's a notch higher of, but there we go. That's 48 transmittable science, so we will keep that one. The surface ablation laser experiment. There we go, here at the back. So that's 48 transmittable science. And finally, the seismic data. That's going to be quite a lot of science. Another 72 science. Shame we don't get the 160 for recovering it, but 72 for transmitting it is going to be plenty. So I'm going to transmit that back to KSC, and I'll meet you there so we can review the science we have and have a look at the contracts we're going to do next. Now, I did think that this episode is going to be more pottering than action, but we do have a couple of contracts we could probably knock over quite quickly and they would still be very profitable. Now, the one I'm looking at here is take a picture of Kerbin, and that actually generates 30 science, which is nothing to be sneezed at for a satellite we already have in orbit around Kerbin. We simply have to point it at Kerbin and take a picture, and that gets us 30 full science. But whilst we are on our way into orbit, so to speak, to take that picture, we really ought to rescue Tanra Kerman, who has managed to find herself in need of rescue in orbit. We don't know exactly what orbit she's in. We can check in the tracking center in a little bit. She's in low Kerbin orbit, so it shouldn't be too strenuous a task to collect her. So I think there's two contracts we could quite easily do. Rescuing Tanra Kerman and taking a picture of Kerbin. Perhaps we can capture an image of Tanra, not Tanara, Tanra Kerman, whilst we are taking our picture of Kerbin for the purity of science. So let's collect those two contracts. So let's accept that one and accept this one as well. That should be a nice little haul of funds, science and reputation. And let's get cracking. Here in the tracking station, we can see Tanra's capsule. It's got an apoapsis of 83 and a periapsis of 74. Pretty much like one of the launches that we've done using our script. Now, I don't know if you can see, but this is KSC here. This is the sort of... There we go, there's KSC's peninsula right there. So she's a little bit behind us at the moment, and using a bit of a speed build, we can probably catch her on her next orbit and rescue her. But what I really want to do is I want to go out to Sun 1. Now, Sun 1 was a telescope experiment we launched some time ago. Here we can see it just here, orbiting Kerbin. And we want to use that to take our picture of Kerbin. I don't think we're going to be able to capture. We might just get her as she's coming around the mountain. No, coming round the horizon here. So I want to take a picture using Sun 1 of Kerbin just to finish off that one simple contract. So let's fly that mission and take our picture. Well, this is Sun 1, which we left some time ago. It's got its space telescope here on the front. That was the that was the sun. That was Kerbal that we took an image of. And as you can see, we've almost got Kerbin in our sights already. There's the mun there. So if we just turn ourselves around, let's see if we can reposition Kerbin. There we go. So let's just put the SAS on. That's got Kerbin more or less centered. Now, if we zoom in a little bit, I don't think we're going to be able to see Tanra. I think that's a little bit unlikely. But let's see if we can't reposition. There we go. Got a nice picture of Kerbin there at ×6. There we go, ×6 zoom. We can see the sort of Singapore-like peninsula there. I think that's the one there. And I think this is KSC just coming over the horizon in this. So according to our contract, we have to take a picture of Kerbin using a space telescope, which we have, a space telescope, and we are then going to transmit or recover that science. So let's take our picture. There we go. So we have collected some science, and there we go. We have taken a picture, and then using our transmitter here, we're going to transmit that back. Now you'll notice I'm allowing partial transmission. We don't have that much charge in this device, but we only need to recover the tiniest amount of this picture in order to qualify for transmitting or recovering. So let's do that now. So let's transmit that back to the KSC. You can see up there in the top left, we are transmitting away. There's 50% of it. 75, there we go. Not enough charge. Doesn't actually matter because we have transmitted some of that picture back to Kerbin, so that is some science recover, and that is one contract done. So I think we ought to get on with rescuing Tanra, don't you? Well, we have Jeb, our 2-star pilot, here on the launch pad, and this is the vehicle that we have assembled for this rendezvous. It's a fairly typical vehicle. As you can see, we have asparagus staged fuel pipes in here for these 2 outer tanks. They are connected to Reliant engines here on the bottom. We have a central stage with a swivel engine, and then we have the rendezvous stage, which is this one in here. It's got an LV909 engine here in the center. Now up at the top I have a Mark 1 crew capsule here at the top, and then a Mark 1 lander can just beneath it. I could have gone for the 2 Kerbal capsule, but I thought this produces a slightly slimmer, lighter and more manoeuvrable vehicle. So with that said, I think we need to get on with our rendezvous. So let's get out into map mode and just focus on Kerbin. And here's Jeb in the rescue craft here, ready to launch. And here's Tanra's capsule. So let's, I keep saying Tanra's capsule. So let's set that as a target. And what we're going to do is we're going to launch into a direct rendezvous. And to do that, we need to wait until Tanra's capsule is just about coming over the horizon. So let's just accelerate time a little. And just wait for Tanra's capsule to get to around about here, just as it's peeking its head above the western horizon. It'll probably be hidden behind the mountains, but let's just wait just a little bit longer till it's about here. So there we go. So let's bring it out of time warp, get out of map mode. Now we're going to use our KOS script, our usual KOS script. That does include an element for circularization, which we will skip, but we will allow the script to do the rest of the launch for us, which is mainly just the gravity turn section. Now I have installed 2 extra mods. One is the Real Plume mod, which replaces hot rockets, and that provides us with engine exhaust plumes that vary with altitude and speed. So look out for that as we ascend. And I've also installed the engine lighting mod to give us a little more realistic lighting around the engines, although that might just show off the fact that our engines are about to catch light and explode. But we'll worry about that when our time comes. So ascent has begun. We are just, if we bring ourselves to the side view, just starting to pitch over. The winglets here are controlling our pitch along with the SAS inline reaction wheels we have here at the top with the main capsule. And it's just this top section that we'll be bringing back. We will drop and hopefully recover the LV909 and fuel tank that are in here, and again hopefully recover these 2 outer sections. Now I've not attached any parachutes to this central section in here, which is the swivel section. Perhaps a bit of an oversight, but I'm not sure exactly where we will be dropping that tank, so I didn't bother. Down here on the nav ball, you can see Tanra's little pink reticule here as she just starts to come over the horizon. We can't yet see her target icon up here on the there go our tanks on the horizon here, as we're just too far out of range. So those tanks hopefully will be recovered with stage recovery while the rest of us ascend into orbit. Now I'm just going to kill this script now and go full throttle and then out into map mode. Because it's in map mode, we're going to have to watch out for our closest approach markers. There's the first one. That's where we'll be when we come in with our initial approach. So Tanra is going to be way back here. So we launched a little bit early, but now you can just about see those pink markers, and those pink markers are the sort of downward trend that will pick her up when we're coming down, and we're about 100 kilometer intersections. It's 80, 70. Hopefully, there we go, markers come back. And there we go. Managed to catch it at 500 meters. So on the way back down, we will be meeting Tanra at 500 meters. But as you can see, if we zoom in, we're going to have quite a long, or rather a disparate angle of attack. So there's going to be quite a high relative velocity between our two flight paths here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until we get closer to rendezvous, and then we will carry out our rendezvous maneuvers in the usual way. Now I've just passed apoapsis and I've brought up the nav ball into target mode, so you can see Tanra's pink reticule and our yellow reticule just there, and they're pretty well aligned at the moment. But to give us a little bit of a helping hand, I'm going to bring up the Kerbin Engineering rendezvous display, and that gives us our selected target being Tanra's capsule. We are currently at a distance of 100 kilometers, just over 100 kilometers, with a relative velocity of about a kilometer a second. At the moment we have 90 seconds to rendezvous, and you can just see Tanra's capsule getting into range. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a factor of 10 to ensure our target velocity and our relative distance remain under control. So our relative velocity should be about 10 times our distance. So at the moment we should be going at about 100 or 750 meters per second. So we're a little bit above that at the moment. So I'm just going to keep our LV909 on full throttle. We just released our swivel section there that will now be plunging to its fiery doom. So with our factor of 10 being employed here, we're pretty close to it now. We should be going at about 600 meters per second, just under 600 meters. So there we go. So we're about a factor of 10 between those two numbers. Just these two digits here in front of the various decimal and commas in the figure. So that just keeps us under control. And the reason that's important is we've only got a relatively weak LV909 engine here on the back. And if we let these two figures get out of control, we could find ourselves with Tanra whizzing past us underneath. Now I'm also going to herd our yellow reticule onto our pink reticule, as would be normal for any rendezvous. So let's keep both of those two things in mind, our factor of 10 and of course herding our yellow reticule. So let's just keep both of those tasks well in hand. So there we go, two reticules on top of each other, and our factor of 10 being maintained. So we are, as you say, plunging down from our apoapsis towards Tanra's orbit. So ultimately we will be in orbit and hopefully parked up right next to Tanra's capsule, or whatever she's finding herself stranded within. Now we've a little bit gone over our factor of 10, but that's not a problem. It just means we'll need to wait just a little bit longer for our rendezvous. So we now have 2 minutes and 47 seconds for rendezvous. Now, never be tempted to accelerate across a gap. Instead, if you do want to speed up time, then speed up time. And just use the beauty of time warp to cross some of those distances. Now, we will keep herding, and the further away from the reticule itself we do the herding, the more herding we do, and the less relative velocity that we will lose. Now the camera has flipped, which means we are now in orbit, so we are able to carry out our maneuvers in peace and quiet of space. So we should be coming up quite parallel to Tanra now. So again, I will use a little bit of time warp to cross this 14 kilometers. So we're still dropping down towards her. So there we are, she's 10 kilometers below us. We're going in at about 100 meters a second, and we're pretty much going down towards her, but let's keep herding those reticules together. There we go, herded together. And we're approaching at 75 meters a second. So again, use a little bit of time warp. Just being very careful with the time warp, just keeping an eye on the two reticules, making sure they don't drift apart. So let's get our factor of 10 in hand. It shouldn't be much of a problem now. We're only going at 60 meters per second. We've got plenty of time to manage that. So 2.5 kilometers and 30 meters per second. Just keeping our reticule nailed. And going in at about 12 meters per second. So I think Tanra has just gone under us, so we're starting to drift away to one side. So let's bring those reticules back together. 2 kilometers. Going in at 9 meters per second. Reticules just drifting. So let's push them back together again. And approaching at 6 meters per second. So 3 minutes till closest approach. And we're just under 1 kilometer now. Reticules are just drifting apart. Now, it doesn't really matter if they drift apart a little bit, because we don't actually want to be crashing into Tanra's vehicle, and we have no way of docking, so it doesn't really matter as long as we pull up within about 40 or 50 meters. So that's what I'm aiming for. So if we pop out into map mode and just have a look at our closest maneuver, closest approach markers, it'll be about 200 meters according to this calculation. So that should be just fine. So we're drifting in at 3.6. So let's just bring ourselves towards that closest approach point. Reticules just drifting apart, so we'll push them back together again. Approaching at just over 2.5 meters per second. Closest approach in 2.5 minutes. Now we are just dropping down onto the dark side of Kerbin, so we don't have much time to perform this maneuver if we want to do it in the light. So I'm just going to push the reticules together again, and we're approaching at 2 meters per second. So I'm just going to get ready to pull up when we get below about 100 meters. Anything between 40, 50 or so is nice and snug. Any closer than that, then you're in the realms of crashing. Now, I think the sun has just set, so it's going to be a little bit dark for Tanra to find her way to the capsule. But she should be okay. So 80, so I'm just going to look to stop ourselves just as we get to about 50 meters. So we just got to kill off about 2 meters per second. Oop. I think Jeb wanted to have a look, but he's not actually getting much of a look from in that capsule. That's fat finger syndrome, I think you'll find. So we are actually now drifting a little bit away. So that's so much for fat fingers. So we are actually drifting a little bit away now from Tanra. So after that little mistake, let's just kill off that last little bit. There we go, 0 meters per second. Perfect. So we don't need our rendezvous HUD anymore. But just to give Tanra a little bit of a helping hand, I am going to turn the craft facing her, which is more or less like so. So we're going to put and point north. There we go. We're going to point north and just lock it on that normal vector. There we go. So that's normal. It is actually vibrating, and that's because the engine is constantly trying, despite having no thrust, trying to keep us on the straight and narrow. So let's just put stability assist on, and that should lock us in place. So we've got the capsule facing. So this is the crew hatch Tanra's going to want to find herself within. So let's pop over to Tanra's capsule now and just pick up radio contact, give her the good news that we're here. She's an engineer, so let's get her out on EVA and just get her over to the capsule. So there we go. So she's turned around. Now I did put some extra handholds onto the outer part of the crew capsule, so she should have plenty of handholds. So just approach very slowly. Seems to be doing pretty well. Maybe a little bit high. And there she is, drifting gently towards the hatch. So grabbed and board. Excellent. So we have now successfully rescued Tanra. So I think it's about time we planned our safe return. I'll see you in a second. Well, we're back in map mode, and you can see KSC just here. And you can also see our rescue craft that's just here on the dark side. It still shows Tanra's old capsule, and according to these markers, we will be hitting it at a relative speed of 0.1 meter per second in about 8 minutes. So we are going to have to plan a maneuver. So what I suggest we do is, while we're at it, why don't we add a maneuver here to bring us back down to Kerbin. Now what I'm going to do, I've started the maneuver, but what I am going to do is I'm going to bring up the Trajectories mod. And this will enable us to find out exactly where we will be landing. So you can see the predicted course is this dotted line, but our actual course, taking into account atmospheric drag, will be just here, just off the KSC. So if we give this just a little bit more of a tweak. Oops, I'm going north now. Let's grab hold of this one. Just pull it back. That should be, if we zoom right in, just off the peninsula. So let's pull that in. Oh, that's too far. There we go. Now, I have been criticised for using precise node too precisely and then executing manoeuvres very inefficiently and leaving loads of delta V left over. So do you know what? I'm just going to plonk us down in the ocean. So we're going to execute this manoeuvre and hopefully turn out round about here. So let's go back into... let's go back to get the manoeuvre node up and get us onto orbit retrograde. So where is orbit retrograde? Where are we? There we go. Orbit retrograde. So all that remains is to go to the manoeuvre node. You can use warp to manoeuvre node, and that will give us a Kerbin alarm clock warning when we get within 3 minutes of this manoeuvre, which actually isn't very far. We are quite low on our orbit, so it's going to be quite quick in cutting down our warp. So there we are. We've warped back down to standard warp, and still quite a long way away from the manoeuvre. It's only an estimated burn of 1 second. So let's warp right up to the manoeuvre. Now, it doesn't particularly matter. All we're looking for is a retrograde burn around about here that causes our trajectory to end up round about here. So let's do that. There we go. So we didn't really need a manoeuvre to do this, but it does help with the prediction. So let's plonk ourselves on retrograde and then just burn. So you can see our altitude dropping, our periapsis disappearing into the planet. And we cut the engines right there where our predicted end of normal flight would be if it wasn't for air resistance. And if we delete that manoeuvre node, there we go. We overdid it just very slightly, but to our advantage, because that looks like we should be splashing down in the shallows and we could even wade to shore. So I think we did pretty well there. Trajectories mod or not. So popping back into well, this is a rather nice shot, isn't it? There we go. So I'll tell you what, why don't we take this as a postcard to let Tanra know how she returned. I don't know what sort of view she's got, but that's a pretty good view for everyone else nevertheless. Now, one of the things I am going to do, which Mike Aben points out that's really, really, really essential, and it's never actually caught me out yet, but it definitely will at some point, and that is to jettison our spare parts sideways. You really don't want those spare parts, those jettison sections, hitting you on the way down. So I'm going to jettison them off to one side. One thing that has happened, though, is I've jettisoned a part rather late, and it's basically stuck to the bottom of my rocket, and I've been unable to dislodge it. So thanks, Mike. That was a good point well made. So let's turn ourselves retrograde again and allow gravity and air resistance to do its thing. Now, what do we have? We do have some very explodable parts. So I am going to rotate. I'm going to rotate these mini pack of supplies out of the way, but unfortunately we have these handrails, which Tanra didn't actually need in the end. So I am wondering whether they will suffer on re-entry. I mean, we do have the heat shield to protect the SAS and the batteries, but we do have the edge of the capsule, and we do have these handrails. But we shall see. We will see indeed. Now, we've just entered the top of the atmosphere, but we probably won't see any light or heating effect until we start getting into this thicker part of the atmosphere. So I'm going to use physics time warp, which is just 1, 2, 3, or 4, and just get us down to what are we about 60,000 meters. So let's just go down to that point. Tanra's jumping up and down with excitement. She's an engineer. We could do with some engineers. We need to get some engineers out and about manning some of our external bases. Perhaps we'll get Tanra along with some scientists out to Duna one of these days. So that's something we do need to do. And I also have a mission, just a personal mission, to go to Lathe and get a ground base on Lathe. So we will need a team to send to both Duna and Lathe. So Duna will be our maybe our practice for that. So we should start seeing some of the heating effects very soon. There we go. Plunging into our fiery doom. Let's hope it's not too much doom, even if it is fiery. So we're about 49. So that was about 50, not 60 kilometers up when you start getting into that thicker part of the atmosphere. So let's just keep ourselves on our retrograde and allow our ablator. Let's just keep an eye on our ablator. It's down to 199 units of ablation, whatever units of ablation are measured in. Tanra is still excited, although in the darkness can't quite see if Jeb is excited as well. Mind you, he's a 2-star pilot now. He's done this plenty of times. So we're down at 40 kilometers. Still got a pretty hefty speed, 2 kilometers a second, over 2 kilometers a second, and we're not really decelerating very much, despite the effects, because we're still very shallow angle of attack to the airstream and to the atmosphere, but we are going down. It's now 36 kilometers, just over 36 kilometers. This is the KSC continent, and you can just see the mountain range here behind the KSC. I think we can just about see Munrise as well. Quite impressive there on the horizon. So let's take another shot. There we go. A little bit of a bug with transfer window planner, basically, appearing when you do just about anything, but easily dismissed. Let's get ourselves back onto our retrograde marker. We can just see the peninsula here now. We can just about make out some of the buildings for KSC and the second runway. That's on the island just here. We're down to 1.9 kilometers a second. 24 kilometers above sea level. And we've got some heating going on here. I'm not actually sure what's heating up. That could be the capsule, but it doesn't seem serious, so that's gone away as well, so we should be okay. Start making out more of the buildings now here, the rather dirt-ridden, rock-ridden runway, which we've never upgraded. Bit of a shame. That shame on us for not upgrading the runway and doing a little bit more with our aircraft. Now we have fully decelerated now through the effects. Let's just have a quick look in map mode, and you can see we have rather descended, or rather slowed down a little bit more than expected. So we're going to be landing somewhere in these grasslands, which is no big deal. That's fine, no big deal at all. Because it just means they'll have to send out a car for us, get a decent car, rather than a rather soggy landing. Now, parachutes are now safe to deploy. We are 7,000 meters above the terrain and coming down at a speed of about 300 meters per second. So I'm just going to let us come down a little bit further before deploying the parachutes, because I want to come a little bit into the flats here first. So let's get the parachutes deployed now and just switch off. Just switch off the RCS. Yes, switch off the RCS, don't need that. Switch off the SAS and just let the rather excess of parachutes bring us to a nice gentle landing. So let's get us on to surface speed. Surface speed is currently 94 meters per second, but our parachutes will soon be opening. There we go. Our parachute's opening at just under 1 kilometre, and that's bringing us down to a nice soft landing at 4 meters per second. To be honest, Jeb actually looks a little bit, well, sad at this point that his trip is over. He really needs more space time. And to accelerate that, let's accelerate time again. Bring us down the last of the 700 meters into these low hills that we have here. Hopefully there are no rocks that we are going to land on, and hopefully it looks soft enough, it looks flat enough, but you never know. Perhaps we will hit a pretty serious slope. Never mind, we're landing where we're landing. We're just 4 meters per second. We're 250 meters above the surface. I think I did see, yeah, there we go. There is our shadow. So let's just come out of time warp for the last 100 meters. I wouldn't want to slam into the surface whilst still using the miracle of time warp and find ourselves rolling over and exploding. But no, I think we're pretty safe. I think we're pretty flat. I think that's our debris landing over there. Hopefully that will be recovered as well. So just landing safely here on the surface, nice and gentle. Yeah, I think that'll be flat enough. And there we have a nice safe landing for our intrepid crew, Jeb and Tanra. So let's just make a record of that for the KSC. I wonder what Tanra can see from her IVA view. Not very much. Just one blade of grass up there in the distance. Not really anything to write home about, but it is home. It is definitely home. So all always remains to do is recover this vessel and then see a summary of our mission. Well, back at KSC, we didn't recover any science, but we did recover some parts. So the command pod, for example, and the lander can that Jeb and Tanra were in. And we recovered a total of 9,210 funds from that. Obviously, we did recover our crew. We have our 2-star pilot Jeb, and Tanra has gained 2 XP and advanced as a level 1 engineer. So that is all well and good. Clearly, we did save Tanra and recover Tanra on Kerbin, so that is our contract done, and we can see some of those messages here in our notifications window. So we did recover Tanra for 56,000 funds. We did safely rescue her from orbit. That was one of the criteria of the contract. We got some money for actually saving her, 5,940. We didn't recover the debris. Now that was the debris including the swivel engine that crashed down at 200 meters per second. We did lose a little bit of funds for that. That was almost 4,500 funds. We did, however, recover some of our other parts. So there's 3,500 for that section and another 3,500 for that section. So that was rather a successful mission. We recovered Tanra. And we have also taken our picture of Kerbin, and we have taken a few more samples of science from the surface of Duna. So that really is a meat and 2 veg episode. The meat being the rescue of Tanra, and the vegetables being our science from Kerbin, our carrots, and our bluey green vegetables being our picture of Kerbin. So with that said, I hope you are enjoying your dinner, and I will see you again very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.